Episode 1 of Euphoria Season 3 starts with us 5 years in the future, somewhere in Mexico. Rue hasn't been up to anything good since high school, hanging out below the border and ferrying drugs up into California to repay her debts. For now, she makes it through Texas and onto her farm, where Rue dons the alias Ruby and pretends to be a college reporter. The family there are God-loving and very kind, with their oldest, Daisy, offering Rue a lift to the bus depot, where she eventually ends up in California. It takes around 11 minutes into the episode before we finally learn more about what's going on. You see, a few years after high school, Rue was working in a smoke shop and was approached by Lori. Rue owes Lori a lot of money after the fiasco with the suitcase and the pills in Season 2. The debt was initially $10,000, but at a 20% monthly interest rate and a fair amount of time having passed, she now owes around $43 million. Rue has no choice but to become a drug mule to repay Lori, who agrees to settle for only $100,000. Part of the ferrying process includes swallowing ballooned baggies full of drugs and forcing them down her throat. This is a process called body packing, and the dangers are very real. If a balloon breaks inside her, she's likely to die. Rue isn't alone while she's doing this though, as she decides to bring Faye on board to help too. It's not a pretty sight, but this is how fentanyl is smuggled into the US. After Fezco's house got raided last season, resulting in Ash being killed of course, Lori went into business with her cousin Harley and his son Wayne. It's a tight-knit operation, and across the span of 2 years, Rue has done over a dozen runs and become the #1 mule. In between runs, Rue also drives for Uber, making extra cash. Sometimes during all this craziness, Lexi lets Rue sleep on her couch, but this time Lexi ends up lecturing her about how Christians are judgmental. Rue is caught up on this though and speaks to Ali, asking him about the Bible and religion in general. She's searching for happiness of course, and believes this may be the way to find it. There are excerpts there about homosexuality that Rue questions, but Ali tells her it's very simple. She's either into faith or she's not. Rue decides to read every word as absolute fact. Rue's got plenty of time to do this of course while she's driving around as a mule and as an Uber driver, so she begins with the audiobooks from Genesis and works her way through. Now Lexi isn't talking to Fezco and has been avoiding him for a while now. After the raid, Fezco has been behind bars and serving a 30-year sentence. That's worlds away from Lexi's job, where she works on a soap in Hollywood. While she's happy to be with all the Hollywood creatives, Cassie has a very different direction that she's travelling. She's settled down for a traditional suburban life, but she's desperate to use her body to become TikTok famous. She dresses herself up as a dog and tries to create content. They have a housekeeper called Joanna helping her out as a videographer, but Nate, whom Cassie is still with, is not happy. He accuses Cassie of being a prostitute and tells her that he's busy out in the real world while she's playing dress up. Nate is moving up in the world, pointing out that he's got more than enough money to support them both. At least that's what he says to her. Nate has taken over his dad's business, but it's hard to build in Southern California. It's not an easy gig, and between this and Cassie's insatiable desire for a big wedding, there's a lot going on. Cassie wants to branch out to OnlyFans and start selling content to desperate men. She's pretty confident it'll work, especially as she's not going full on with the porn, but how Nate will react to this is another matter altogether. Maddie meanwhile is currently working in management, representing influencers and a few actors including a guy called Dylan Reed. Dylan is a heartthrob of a show called LA Nights, and he takes a shining to Lexi when she offers some creative direction around his character. Back with Rue, she's called out to see Lori. There's a big buyer called Alamo Brown whom Rue needs to drop a package off to. When Rue asks to use his bathroom, she heads up the stairs and becomes enamoured by the numerous gorgeous ladies there, deciding to get involved and dance with them. That's the wrong move, as Rue is confronted by Alamo himself, who calls her disrespectful. However, the pair seem to get along quite well after that initial interaction, with Alamo admitting he's in the business of cashing in on girls. Alamo owns and runs 5 of the dirtiest strip clubs in California, and when Rue hears this, she wants to get involved and be hired by him to come work in the club. He seems to be okay with it, but there's still Bishop, Alamo's right-hand man, to contend with. He's less than enthused about the idea. That night, Cassie broaches the idea of OnlyFans with Nate. He immediately thinks it's porn and doesn't want her selling her body. Cassie though is having none of that and tells Nate matter-of-factly that she doesn't want a ghetto wedding. Eventually, Cassie convinces him to let her pursue this. Meanwhile, one of the girls at Alamo's, Tish, ends up overdosing. It turns out the drugs Rue brought over from Lori have been laced with fent. Alamo immediately goes after Rue, questioning just what she's doing. Rue tries to talk herself out of trouble, explaining what she's been up to and wanting to help him. Alamo decides to put her faith in God to the test, taking her outside and putting a green apple on her head. He shoots the apple and not Rue, who breathes a sigh of relief, bringing episode 1 to a close. Episode 2 of Euphoria Season 3 starts with a look at Maddie. She arrived in a city with a big dream but little to her name. Having done her research, Maddie approached Mrs. Pensler, a high-flying executive, and talks her way into an assistant job. Fast forward to the pandemic, and with Maddie's company paying her to stay home, Maddie skirts the COVID rules by taking photos of a woman on the beach called Caitlin. Maddie winds up managing Caitlin, convincing her to be more provocative over time and selling herself for hungry fans. Maddie's boss is not happy when she finds out, especially when Caitlin winds up schmoozing with the hotshot star Dylan Reed. Maddie's got no choice but to let Caitlin go, save for losing her job. A year later, Caitlin winds up striking rich on OnlyFans and convinces others to follow her. This certainly eats at Maddie, who realises had she taken a gamble and ditched her assistant job, she could have made a tidy commission. She does receive a message from Cassie not long after though, asking if they can meet for lunch. Maddie smirks, her intentions at this point certainly unclear. Back in the present, Alamo is still wary over Rue, but for the time being she's allowed to prove her worth. She's forced to muck out the pigsties and covers up Tish's death too, burning the evidence. Alamo rings Lori and confronts her about the tainted drugs, but she plays dumb, pretending that she's innocent. In reality, Wayne had forgotten to tell Faye to clean the scale, and unfortunately that residue had mixed with the ecstasy, hence the taint. With one of his girls gone, Alamo announces that he's taking Rue, and Lori is pissed. Rue though convinces herself that she's made a deal with the devil, but seemingly free for the time being. With $300 to her name, Rue is driven out to one of the strip clubs called the Silver Slipper, and things are certainly looking up. The club she's taken out to is the same one Tish used to work at, and there are pictures of the girl up in the dressing room. As we later find out, Tish's best friend is one of the top girls here called Angel. After work, Angel and Rue hook up, but Rue still misses her muse, Jules. You see, a few years ago, Rue actually visited Jules in the city. She was in art school and Rue didn't have too much going on. It never quite felt like how it used to in high school, and Rue relapsed bad. Cut off from her family and forbidden from seeing Gia, Rue hasn't been sober since then. Alamo's pissed that Angel is standing up to him, while Rue winds up spotting a hidden safe in the back room. This is where all the money is stashed, and it'll be interesting to see if Rue is tempted to steal it. Back to Maddie for now. After the DM from Cassie, she knows that she's the sort of girl she can work with. Of course, there's still bad blood between them, and Cass being with Nate is a serious sticking point too. Maddie agrees to meet her and does so by putting on a big show. She waits for Cassie, then makes a grand entrance, turning heads and pretending to be on a big important call. After a few drinks and skirting around the real reason for this meeting, Cassie and Maddie get down to brass tacks. The latter sees Cassie's social media as a bit try-hard, especially the dog act. Maddie thinks she should be herself and lean into her personality instead. Back home, things are about to get a little wild. The last time we saw Cal, Nate called the cops on him and he was taken away in handcuffs. As we soon see, he actually narrowly avoided prison. However, his reputation is in tatters. Cal has gone from the town's top real estate developer to a sexual deviant, marked with a scarlet letter for the rest of its life. The business is not doing too hot either, and Nate owes a lot of money to various partners and investors. One guy in particular is not messing around and tells Nate he owes $600k by the end of the month. This Cassie situation is not helping matters either, and Cal is shocked to learn Nate is about to open up another round of talks with investors. Unfortunately, the party that night does not go to plan. Talk of Cassie's OnlyFans spreads and it spills over into a rather awkward encounter, where Cass makes it clear that Nate's got money issues in front of others, despite his smooth talking. With the party a bust, Nate is concerned to learn Cassie and Maddie are getting closer. He thinks this is revenge on Maddie's part, but Cass is quick to point out that Maddie is a social media expert and simply helping her brand. But does Maddie have an ulterior motive here, I wonder? Back at the Silver Slipper, Rue speaks to Angel and reveals that Tish has died of an overdose. Hearing this, Angel begins to spiral and the club's top stripper eventually needs rehab. Alamo promises there's another promotion in store for Rue if she follows through with this, so Rue drives Angel up to rehab that night. The place is shady to say the least, and she's definitely concerned, especially when there's no paperwork to fill out. In fact, between the receptionist, sporting dirty fingernails, and the dark ominous hallways, the implication is that this is a front for trafficking. That's only exacerbated further when an ambulance rocks up outside just as Rue leaves. As the camera pans across the street, we see somebody is sitting in their car watching. In the middle of all this craziness, Rue winds up meeting Jules in a city and explains she's off the hard stuff. She drinks and smokes a bit of weed, sure, but she's avoiding anything that would destroy her life. Jules admits she does have a boyfriend, but he's currently at home with his family. Eventually, Jules heads off to take a bath and invites Rue along too, despite knowing this isn't going to be good for either of them. That night, Alamo sends a message to Laurie. He drops off a massive pig in Laurie's house with a message, simply reading, "Remember, the Alamo." Episode 3 of Euphoria Season 3 starts with Jules inspired to start painting her new piece. She's found a new window of opportunity coming from rotating sugar daddies across the month. This is big money, and she doesn't even mind indulging in some of their weird little kinks. One in particular, a plastic surgeon called Ellis, is a bit different from the norm. He has a family, but his wife knows that he has weaknesses. This, of course, comes from women like Jules. However, because of this conversation, it opens her eyes and Jules contemplates whether to even continue with art school. Making more money than she could have ever imagined, she drops all her other clients and focuses exclusively on this plastic surgeon. Meanwhile, Rue is working her way up for Alamo. She helps sell guns, sending them down to Mexico. Alamo sees her as his employee of the month, but when Rue questions the legitimacy of this business, it rubs him up the wrong way. Alamo reminds her that the only thing that matters here is power, and making money is a form of power, which then directly ties into legitimacy. So in no uncertain terms, he tells her to keep her mouth shut and stop this line of inquiry. When a pig suddenly comes flying into the strip club, Alamo shoots it dead, and knows this is Laurie's doing. To get revenge, Rue mentions how Laurie has a parrot that she loves. Alamo decides they need to pay her a visit, but he has Rue do the pickup. Laurie is instantly suspicious when she finds out. There's further drama this time around though, as Cassie and Nate prepare for their wedding. Jules and Rue are here too, although the former is barely wearing anything to be honest. Naturally, Cal casts glances over to her a lot, while Nate is hyperventilating and struggling to compose himself in the toilets. He does eventually step up to the plate and waits for Cassie. It's not exactly the dream walk down the aisle that Cassie envisioned, as her mum bemoans her own failed marriage the whole time that they're walking. When Rue is forced to leave the party early, with Alamo demanding she step up, the wedding moves over to the speeches. Cal calls Nate a winner for marrying Cassie, with a speech that's generally quite classy. He also makes a point to say what happened is in the past. Unfortunately, his ex-wife Marsha takes the opportunity to make one last dig at Maddie. Jules does eventually wind up talking to Cal at the bar though. He explains he took the videos not as blackmail material, but as something to watch when he's in the mood at night. However, he does mention here how her video was mysteriously absent from the others that were sent to the police. This explains why she wasn't involved in the allegations. Cal shrugs it off and admits he pledged a plea deal and unfortunately is now on a sex offender registry. While the pair seem to be on good terms, there's a big problem. Around Maddie, obviously in a somewhat awkward situation here, Naz, the man whom Nate owes a ton of money to, shows up out the blue. Naz immediately berates Nate and demands the guy cough up the money he owes. Nate does his best to try and calm things down, especially with Cassie starting to spiral. Cassie is scared, especially when Naz promises to make Nate's life a nightmare. This worries her, and it's the worst possible timing given they have their first dance up next. When Nate suggests they downsize a bit to try and resolve things, Cassie, refuses. However, Nate's friends and their wives are growing more suspicious by the day and realise with horror that Nate is a con artist and completely broke. One girl even mentions how they put their kids' college tuitions into the project. Nate does his best to sweet talk one of the guys, concocting a story about how a rare flower is slowing down construction work. Nate is in a very difficult spot here, and in front of everybody, Cassie heads over and calls out her husband. She brings up how he's conning all his friends and neighbours, and this eventually spills over to her setting off a champagne cork right in his eye. The hostility only remains temporarily though, as the pair get in the limo together. Nate brings up how he didn't want to tell her about any of this before the wedding. Nate promises to get them out of this hole and even talks about having kids together, which helps thaw the icy wall that's grown between them. Meanwhile, Rue arrives at Laurie's after talking to Fezco in the car. They banter a bit, especially when Fezco talks about a prison escape, before Rue eventually makes it to Laurie's. Bishop is here too, and he follows Rue. Inside, Bishop brings up how Alamo could switch to some of Laurie's competitors, but is loath to do so. He wants to carry on working together, but to do so, they need to test everything. While Rue gets busy working at the table, shrugging off Laurie's polite suggestion she come back to work, with the excellently descriptive "the grass is always greener by the septic tank" line, Bishop drops a pill in the parrot's water, spiking it. Things get tense though when Bishop takes a feather as a souvenir, but the pair do eventually leave. When Nate and Cassie head home, looking to make sweet love, there's a big problem. Naz is there with his goons and they beat him bloody. Cassie starts crying when she winds up bleeding here, and she's eventually forced to watch as Nate's toe is cut off. On the way home, Rue is pulled over by the DEA, while Laurie's parrot ends up dying. Episode 4 of Euphoria Season 3 starts with Rue in police custody. The sniffer dogs have found fentanyl in her car, but the line of inquiry doesn't stop there. In the interview room, Rue is questioned specifically about Laurie and her ties to Mexico. Rue claims she's never been to Mexico, despite her being photographed meeting a Mexican cartel member named Uno. He operates a club 20 minutes from the border. Rue could be put away for a long time here if she's not careful. She's either looking at decades behind bars, or she has to become the DEA's confidential source and help take down the drug runners. When Rue returns to Alamo, holding pills that have been switched out for sugar pills and laxatives, she's understandably on edge. There's also been a new app installed on her phone too, and she's told to keep it out in the open as much as possible. Elsewhere, Nate has been patched up, with his toe sewn back on. He sees it as a metaphor for gluing parts of his life together. When Nate mentions he owes $1 million to Naz, Cassie is shocked and scoffs at their marriage, telling him the fairy tale is over. As a result, Cassie rings Maddie to help. She packs up her things and leaves Nate. Cass then gets a makeover to update her from the suburbs to the city. Once that's done, it's on to Hollywood. Alexi gives Jules a new opportunity to paint a portrait, but it doesn't go to plan. Jules winds up painting something rather provocative, and the producers are not happy. They call on Lexi to handle this elegantly, where Jules is apparently struggling to get rid of the nudity she's painted, so instead she just splashes red paint over it. Classy. Unfortunately, this delay has cost the studio $56,000 in shooting. They have to hold the studio for another week, which has cost a further $191k on top of that. That's a lot of cash, and Lexi is told by the director, in no uncertain terms, not to be a net negative. Meanwhile, Laurie is grief-stricken after losing her bird, and there's no way she's going to do business with Alamo anytime soon. That puts Rue in a rather sticky situation, given it's the only reason Rue has been let go by the DEA. Nate decides on a Hail Mary in the middle of this and attends court, trying to find a way around this endangered flower situation. Given it can't be built around or on, it's put him in a very difficult spot. Nate even gets down on his knees and begs the California board for help. He's denied and breaks down, crying. Elsewhere, Maddie starts working on turning Cassie into a new internet porn star, right across the way from Lexi. She's obviously not happy, especially as Lexi is trying her best to do things on the straight and narrow without selling her body, or, in the case of Rue, drugs. Speaking of which, Rue questions Alamo about drug running in Mexico, and it obviously makes her very suspicious. Alamo calls her out for being a rat or even using drugs. Rue takes the opportunity to segue away from this line of inquiry and admits she had a slip up. It's super tense, but thankfully she comes out of this in one piece, with the card game they're playing working as a solid distraction. A game that Rue wins, I may add. Is this a subtle bit of foreshadowing maybe? Anyway, word spreads Angel has run away from rehab, and her locker is replaced with a new stripper called Kitty. Unfortunately, stripping isn't all it's chalked up to be, which she finds out unfortunately, when a couple of punters wind up using her in one of the bedrooms. Rue is shocked by what she sees on the monitors, and I'm not about to explain it here. Back with Cassie and Maddie, the latter takes Cassie out to a party that night. Their destination is Brandon Fontaine's house. This guy has 20 million followers online, so Cassie is tasked with posting a video of her looking hot to help jumpstart her adult career. Cassie easily manages to get it done, and she even winds up ditching Maddie at the party too. Maddie calls on someone called Smiles to help, and Brandon is caught with Cassie in bed. Back at the club, Rue is caught by Magic, another stripper, asking Kitty if she wants to work or if she's being forced into it. Rue is ringing all sorts of alarm bells here with her questioning. She leaves her phone in the office too, but Mum rings and Rue is allowed to answer. It happens to be the DEA agents, who warn her that she's compromised and they think she's a snitch. She needs to find a way to discredit Magic. As the pair fight, masked men suddenly burst into the office and demand the safe be opened. After shooting Eddie in the stomach, he reluctantly opens the safe and the men race off with the gear. As they do, Magic looks at the footage and relays back to Alamo what's happening. Rue gets a good look at the driver as they zoom in on her lips and claim that it's Faye. The DEA, of course, are listening in the whole time. Episode 5 of Euphoria Season 3 starts with Cassie continuing to film content for her channel. Within 24 hours of the video with Brandon going viral, she's managed to nab 17,000 new subscribers. Maddie works Cassie to the bone and eventually she does manage to hit 50,000 subscribers. Maddie continues to help her get even more subs on top of this, with Cassie's angle being to work as the voice of the working man. When Cassie's called a Democrat on a podcast, she laughs back and says she's not retarded. Despite seemingly not caring about Nate, leaving him to pursue this career in Hollywood, we learn that Cassie still wires her husband money. In fact, she pings him $35k to stop him being evicted. Nate has now done a 180 too, now supportive of her channel, but Maddie is concerned. Cassie's right on the verge of going viral and she thinks Nate is using her, given he'll be entitled to 50% of her assets when she does. Brandon has also been instrumental in helping Cassie here though, and he argues more so than Maddie has. He tells her that Maddie has no power, and with professional videographers and editors at her back, he encourages her to cut Maddie loose so she can flourish. Meanwhile, Nate speaks to Cassie and believes that she should do some erotic scenes with Brandon. Nate has apparently been watching all of her videos and calls her a winner, giving her a rallying call to go and make money. Cassie rings Maddie next and learns she's an assistant, deciding that she's going to part ways with her. However, Maddie is nonchalant to the whole thing, and in fact she actually grabs her phone afterwards, makes a call and cancels an audition on LA Nights with Dylan. When Cassie panics and claims her head is swelling, Maddie has a contract ready for her to sign. Cassie doesn't even read it, immediately heading to the back page and signing on the dotted line. Only we soon learn that Maddie doesn't have a rehearsal lined up for her and she's been bluffing this whole time. Funnily enough, Cassie talks her way in through the front door, given her connections with Lexi, and manages to impress the director, much to Lexi's chagrin. Even with Cassie's help though, Nate has been missing his payments. When he misses his latest, Naz sends his goons over to beat him down. Meanwhile, Alamo prepares a counter-offensive to go after Lori and her gang. After they stole the drugs from a safe, he's determined to get what belongs to him. Alamo's pissed over Eddie's fear, seeing him as a Judas. Now Alamo calls Rue over to talk in private, but Bishop speaks to her en route, telling her that bad luck seems to be following her everywhere. The chat with Alamo that follows is brief, explaining that Lori wants to meet. Rue obviously passes this news on to the DEA, who want her to wiretap Lori so she incriminates herself. Rue is in the weeds and needs to get results, so she phones Wayne and thankfully he mentions how they've got a new girl working as a mule. Rue takes a detour over to Jules' that afternoon, who encourages her to let loose and have sex. However, when Ellis arrives later that evening and sees Rue's clothes, complete with initials in her underwear, he's not happy. Ellis tells Jules that she can't put his family at risk. Back with Alamo, Magic finds the planted drugs in her locker, courtesy of Rue's doing, and immediately brings it to him. She knows she's being framed, and Alamo starts to examine more of the evidence closer, especially Rue claiming not to know the voices of those robbers despite them working for Laurie. While Rue meets with Maddie to discuss business, Alamo shows up. He takes Rue outside to speak with G and Bishop, where they drive to the outskirts of Alamo's pad. Rue is forced to dig a hole. Alamo senses a business opportunity with Maddie here and wants to send his girls her way in exchange for a 15% cut of the profits. At the Silver Slipper, Maddie picks Kitty and Magic as the girls she wants to work with. In the middle of this, Lexi begrudgingly feeds back to Cassie that she's got her role on the soap and she's over the moon. Back at Alamo's for now, Rue is buried up to her neck in dirt, and as the main man comes riding in, he looks set to whack Rue's head clean off, bringing the episode to a close. Episode 6 of Euphoria Season 3 starts with a bit of backstory to Alamo. As a child, his mother introduced him to Preston, a man covered in scars but also her new lover. He loved her dearly and things seemed to be going well between them. Now Preston used to work at a chemical factory until a vat blew up in his face, hence the scars. Alamo's mum looks past that though, and soon their fortunes change. Preston comes home with a big wad of cash, and from there onwards they start to live the high life. In fact, Preston has every intention of asking Alamo's mother to marry him. Unfortunately, when they head back to the apartment after a vacation, they find the place completely empty. They've been robbed of everything, so Alamo's mum decides to leave Preston completely. The pair move to a brand new city and start again, where Alamo realises with sickening horror that all of this was just one big act. His mum is a professional honeypot, using Alamo to sell the story of being in need of a man before robbing Preston blind. After being betrayed by his own mum, Alamo vowed to himself that night that he'd never let a woman outsmart him ever again. Now back in the present, Alamo rides to Rue and, predictably, doesn't whack her head off. Just before he swings though, Rue suddenly blurts out that her driver was Faye and promises to get Alamo's money back. Unfortunately, her plan hits a bit of a snag, given Faye and Wayne are madly in love. She's not about to betray and rob the guy anytime soon, but Rue just needs a picture of the key. Their plan is then to use that to break into Wayne's safe by printing a 3D replica of the key. Rue eventually guilt trips Faye over Ashtray and Fezco, eventually talking her into it. As the picture comes through, Alamo entertains Laurie and her guys at his pad. It's certainly tense though, with Rue right in the middle of this all, recording on her phone. Laurie gets right down to brass tacks, bringing up his affiliation with Gold Rush Medical Services. Apparently he's using ambulances and medical passes to ferry girls up and down the border. Laurie senses an opportunity and wants to use these girls to smuggle fentanyl across from Mexico. If Alamo agrees to this, Laurie promises to give back his cash. Laurie even wants Rue to go down across the border, but Alamo's quick to point out he doesn't trust her to do that. Now after one final threat, the pair part ways. As for Rue though, she immediately heads over to meet the FBI agents. Given she's kept her word, they promise that a US attorney is likely to look at her case favourably as a result. As for everyone else, well, they're probably going to spend the rest of their lives behind bars. Of course, Maddie is stuck right in the middle of this, given she's working with Alamo's girls. While the plan is in motion, Rue heads over to see Jules. She flirts with the idea of having kids and waking up to someone she loves all the time. Her dream, of course, is to live happily ever after with her beloved. Jules scoffs at this dream and is having none of it, happy to embrace her beautiful lie with Ellis. In the end, as things get heated and Rue questions just what Jules is doing, she smacks Rue upside the head, knocking her flat on the ground. Jules tells her to leave before Ellis arrives. Rue heads to the church instead, praying for redemption. When she gets a call from her mum, Rue admits she wants to start over and make up for the mistake she's made. Then Hollywood Cassie gets her big shot in front of the cameras and she winds up improvising. It's not on purpose though, and Cassie is actually traumatised by what happened with Naz and emotes her heart out. After the scene, the director speaks to Cassie, who mentions how it's been her dream to act since she was little. Lexi does her best to throw her sister under the bus, calling her a sex worker and pointing out what she's done with OnlyFans. The women here call it a new wave of feminism and eventually agree to bring Cassie into the show, but on condition that she delete her OnlyFans account. Cassie follows through and deletes her channel that evening without talking to Maddie first. Uh-oh. She also struggles to get through to Nate as well, who continues to be stalked by Naz's goons. Honestly, this scene is like the Family Guy scene, with Brian being stalked by Stewie who wants his money back. Once you see that, it's hard not to just compare it every time they're on screen. Anyway, that afternoon, Cass receives a package in the mail, which happens to be a severed finger, with a note reading, "Answer the phone." Back at Alamo's, Rue is forced into the plan of grabbing the money from Wayne's safe. She doesn't have much of a choice either, given Bishop threatens her that afternoon. He brings up how he's spoken to Leslie and told her how well Rue is doing. At this point, Rue's stomach turns and she realises this is the reason her mum phoned her when she was at the church. On her way home, Rue narrowly misses a truck while driving, but when she swerves the car off-road, she heads out and notices a burning bush. Episode 7 of Euphoria Season 3 starts with a switching perspective and focusing on Ali. Growing up, he wasn't always religious, but without God, he gave in to his short-term desires. He was addicted to drugs in a bad way and quickly spiraled out of control. He lost his family after a particularly brutal night with his girlfriend, beating her in the other room while high on drugs. Even worse, their kids were at the dinner table and heard everything too. Because of his horrible relationship with drugs and how damaging it's been for him in his life, once he got clean, Ali refused all forms of drugs, including morphine. Now Ali's mindset here is fixated on atoning for his past by keeping his habits in check. Transforming his mistakes into life lessons has just become part of his character. Now Ali has made it his life mission to try and save others from the same fate he suffered from. However, many others wind up worse than he was, committing suicide or throwing themselves down a one-way street to drug-induced despair and eternal sleep. It's a reminder of how addiction often ends, and Ali even has a notebook with all the names of the men and women he's lost over the years. Now in the present, Eddie returns to Alamo. He's still alive, but with a pretty nasty gash down his stomach. Alamo immediately throws him back in the game, telling Eddie that there are a couple of girls that need a tune-up and he's heading down to Mexico. He'll also be going with one of Laurie's boys, too. Now while this is happening, Rue talks about her spiritual awakening with the burning bush. Lexi is busy writing while she's blabbering on, and when Rue talks about her current job with the DEA, Lexi scoffs at this and pushes her friend away, believing she's simply high on drugs. Rue then heads upstairs to Cass's apartment, where she's not answering. Now after the severed finger fiasco last time out, Cassie is not in a good state. Inside her apartment, Cassie rings Naz and he wants to do business and get his money. Unfortunately, between deleting her OnlyFans account and the network loath to pick her up as a genuine actress, she's a bit strapped for cash. Now Maddie also comes under fire for this too, and she's eventually let go from her secretary role. When Maddie finds out that Cass has deleted her OnlyFans account, she's understandably pissed and forces Cass to play by her rules. The only card left to play though is to head out with Dylan Reed. They go for a night out and Cassie winds up sleeping with him. After taking a picture together, Cass takes his phone while he's in the bathroom and sends a message out to all of his followers, with a new handle and claiming that Cassie is the best lay he's ever had. This tends to do the trick, and Cassie manages to secure over 100,000 subscribers in record time on her new account. However, when Maddie notices the severed finger sitting in a glass with water in the sink, she realises there's something else going on here. Well, it turns out Naz is getting impatient and wants his money sooner rather than later. In fact, he heads over and pays her a visit personally. His hired goon literally grabs her and chokeslams her through a glass table, like this is a WWE match, but he doesn't go in for the pin. Instead, Naz ties her up and then gives her 72 hours to help Nate, who's currently buried alive and getting up close and personal with a snake. And honestly, if anyone else has a fear of snakes like I do, that's a very difficult scene to watch. And Naz instructs Cass not to say anything to anyone, otherwise she's going to be in a world of pain. This is when Naz's goon puts a gun to the door, threatening to shoot Rue when she knocks on the door. Getting nowhere with Lexi, Rue speaks to Ali about her current drama involving Laurie and the DEA. She's doing one more run and determined to right the wrongs in her life, and this is something that Ali knows better than most, and she's also worried that her mum may be in danger. Now in the morning, the operation goes ahead. While the DEA focus on the drama with the ambulance and heading down to Mexico, Rue pays Lori a visit to get into her safe. However, they obviously don't trust her and even threaten to cut her eyelids off too. They eventually keep her locked up in the bedroom after a night around a fire. When Maddie receives a call from Naz demanding $1 million, she asks Alamo for help with this. She also mentions how Rue had a big fight with Lexi, including ranting about Nazis and the DEA.
Why would you do that? Why would you do any of that?
The implication is that the pair have sex in the jacuzzi, but we don't actually see this. We cut away before any of this is shown. Either way, whether they slept together or not, Alamo does agree to give the money for her for the exchange. We soon learn that the whole thing is one big stick up. Alamo shoots Naz when he grabs the briefcase and kills him, while we find out that this bag doesn't have the money in after all. Solving this issue for Maddie means that she effectively owes him big time. Alamo is going to gain a larger cut of Maddie's profits, 20% to be precise. Alamo tells Maddie to wise up when she looks shocked over this, given he doesn't do anything for free. And obviously from the previous episode, we know that he doesn't trust any women, so this was perhaps always going to happen. They both watch on as Nate's coffin is brought up from underground. However, when the coffin is opened, we learn that Nate is already dead. He's been killed by that snake, so all of this was for nothing. Meanwhile, Faye decides to help Rue, knowing that Wayne is lusting for blood and wants to kill her. In the middle of the night, she frees her from the locked room she's kept in, and they creep downstairs to the safe. Once they get the safe open, Rue is shocked to find there's no money inside, but instead a whole bunch of ID cards for different girls, including Mackenzie. Faye starts to get angry and in the end she calls out for Wayne, while Rue is caught in the middle of all this, seemingly caught red-handed. Episode 8 of Euphoria Season 3 picks up the finale with Faye calling out for Wayne. Rue quickly fights her way out of trouble, scrambling away from Wayne, Laurie's goons and certain death. As she brings the gear back to Alamo, who tells Rue that he's proud of her. She's beat up and not in a particularly good state, but Alamo is apparently coming around to the idea that the pair are meant to be, just like she initially said all those episodes ago. He wants Rue to take a week off and relax after all this, while he's going to negotiate a fair trade with Laurie. He claims there'll be a 50-50 split of the load and a lifetime truce which should do the trick. He hands Rue over some pills to help with her pain and tells her not to take them all at once. Given the girl's addiction in the past, that may be easier said than done. However, all of this is about to come crashing down, given the feds are closing in on the smuggling operation. Rue doesn't go back home though, but instead crashes at Allie's place on the sofa. She sits out the big action, toying with whether to take the pills or not, while listening to her Bible audio tapes. There's problems at Laurie's pad though, because, just like in Season 2, Faye happens to be the root of all their problems. She lets slip to Wayne that this is a setup, and they take a horse, riding out just as a tainted ambulance carrying narcotics shows up. Laurie figures something is wrong, but it's too late by the time she realises this. The DEA show up and surround the place, but Laurie refuses to go to prison. She takes the cowardly route out by hanging herself off the roof. However, there's a big twist in all this. Bishop leaves a dead rat in the ambulance when the feds look in the back, and he takes the real one back to Alamo's, which holds all the gear inside. Interestingly, Rue isn't the only mole, and as we soon find out, Eddie is too. He tells the DEA that after this, he's quitting. Rue winds up having a long-winded dream about Fezco breaking out of prison and reuniting with him, taking a heartfelt trip down memory lane. There's some really gorgeous shots here, and it ends with Rue talking to Leslie back home. Unfortunately, all of this happens to be a dream, and not a particularly good one either. When Allie awakens, he finds Rue has passed away on his sofa. It turns out the pills that Alamo gave her are laced with deadly amounts of fentanyl, and Alamo very much set her up. Unfortunately, it also falls to Allie to break the news to Leslie. He also writes Rue's name in his notebook as well. Now a few months pass and Allie heads to group therapy, where he talks about the horrors of addiction. He's also been drinking too, and he's tired of losing people and pouring his heart and soul into something that's seemingly getting no better. He's decided this is going to be his final meeting. He's going to find a better way to be of service, and that, unsurprisingly, comes from violence. Now speaking of violence, this is perhaps a bit of a cheeky way to segue over to Jules. The last time we saw her, she beat down Rue, and once again she's painting. Not penises this time though. Instead, she paints a rather unflattering portrait of Rue that's supposed to be showcasing her euphoric highs, but honestly, when you look at it, it looks more like Rue's burning in hell, and that's the last we see of her this season. So great, thanks for coming. Elsewhere, Cass and Maddie are a mess after what happened with Nate. The pair agree to figure it out together and remain on the same page. They continue to do business together and want Lexi to join them as the storyteller. Now, after Nate's death, Cass has moved back into their old house. With a brown envelope of cash, which is obviously Alamo's 20% cut, Bishop picks up Maddie and they head off to go and see Alamo together. Alexi and Cass stay behind and talk about religion while they do, and Lexi believes the real meaning of the Bible stems from dealing with horrible things and carrying on regardless, given the number of deaths depicted throughout the Bible. Now, Maddie arrives at the club to hand over the cash to Alamo, but Ali shows not long after. Alamo's unaware of this, and after Maddie hands over his cut, Alamo explains that he's had an epiphany. He's questioning what he's doing, given fear is starting to creep in for him. He feels like he's another slave with money in his hand, and he now wants the American dream, complete with the white picket fence and 4 little ones to call his own. This includes Maddie being his wife, and honestly, the look on her face here is priceless. Well, things kick off in a big way before anything is set in stone. Ali demands Alamo make his presence felt after one of his men lies about the fent given to Rue. Alamo does eventually show up, and after using Maddie as a shield, decides they should settle things the old-fashioned way. Ali claims that Rue sent him, and with an ominous timer in the form of an empty champagne bottle rolling across the bar, they prepare to draw as soon as the bottle hits the ground. Bishop is here too with a gun of his own, and it turns out he's double-crossed Alamo. Alamo tries to cheat and fire early, but he soon realises that his gun is empty. Ali then shoots Alamo dead with his 3 remaining bullets. Now, Bishop gives Maddie a ride home and Kitty decides to head out with them too. As for Ali, he winds up at the first Christian house Rue visited when she head up across the border in episode 1. Ali dons the alias of Martin McQueen and joins the family in saying grace, thanking Rue before the final words of narration show the house, an American flag, and the words, God bless us all. As always, let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Smash a like or subscribe to the channel, your support is very much appreciated. I'm Greg Wheeler, and from all of us over here at The Review Geek, we'll see you on the next video.